Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So, we're about to start the Rockstar Tips to power up your Jira Service Management approach. Speaking today, I'm Ryan Counts. I'm a solution engineer for Atlassian for JSM. And my partner in crime is AJ.
Hi, everyone. AJ Schmalenberger. I'm the head of Atlassian Center of Excellence for CPrime, one of the Atlassian solution partners.
Okay. So our whole focus on today is to give you a couple of interesting nuggets that may help you get some ideas for how you can improve your JSM. So let's get into it. We kind of start with, one of the things we both like about the changes in ITIL v4 is that transition from processes to practices. So the whole idea that we don't just set these processes and it's just always going to be that way. It's going to be continual refinement, looking for ways that we can improve IT service management and our IT operations through continual assessment of how we're doing, planning some of those changes, and doing implementations of those changes. Now, what we prescribe is, instead of making major projects of changes, what if we find small little nuggets of change? Change a little, learn a lot about how it affects your environment, and then either revert back or let's build on that improvement. Basically making a bunch of small bets that we're not afraid to lose on, but we learn a lot. And that's the other aspect of this. You'll see that at the end of our continual improvement is measurements. Always have kind of an idea of what is the needle that we want to move a little bit with each of these changes so we can quantitatively measure, did we do anything with it?
So one of the most important pieces of improving your JSM implementation is really understanding where you're at with ITSM specifically. Now, Axelos made a great ITIL maturity map for their implementation of ITSM. And I like to use this and refer back to this as kind of the standard for understanding where you're at in your ITSM journey. Now, there's 0 through 4 levels, right? And there's very chaotic to very organized around using IT as a strategic business. Now, one of the things that you'll notice across all of these levels in the maturity map is that tooling is a foundational aspect of that entire journey. So making sure that your implementation of JSM is ready and set up for you at any point when your ITSM journey is critically important. So knowing where you're at today is the first step, and knowing where you want to be tomorrow is the second step. Look at this maturity map. Take a look at where you are today in your ITSM journey and understand what you need to do to get to that next level. But don't try to go from 0 to 4. Try to go to that next step, wherever you're at. If it's 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, or 3 to 4.
Thank you, AJ. So let's take a moment and look at how JSM enables some of these improvements in our IT operations. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but a few really kind of stand out here. One is our no-code automation, so enabling us to make some significant changes without having to bring in developer resources or building out a big project to think about what we're going to do and having 6-week timelines for any kind of changes on it. The other one I really strongly like is the autonomy that we're given through project orientation of our ITSM projects. That enables me to not have every team that's working in ITSM be at the same level of maturity. We can actually take individual projects and go, let's try a little tweak over in this particular team. Let's try doing something different in a separate team, and let's kind of measure those two against each other. I've seen a number of customers that have kind of like experimentation projects where they test out first a lot of their process improvements for request management or incident management, and see how does that impact a small select group of service desk teams that are working in that project. And if it improves, let's roll that out to the larger group.
Well, and Ryan, isn't it true also that if you have premium or higher, you get access to a free sandbox environment where you can test out a lot of these changes in a non-production environment. And then you can use your data transferred over from your production environment, roll out the changes, and then see if they work, and then put them out into your production environment when you've vetted them out.
That's a great point. And yeah, I've got quite a few customers that leverage that. Yourself?
Yeah, I think that it's one of the most important pieces for doing a good implementation is making sure that you're doing it in a fashion that isn't going to affect anyone negatively, but is using real production data to make sure that it's vetting out and using the creating the right opportunity for your company to improve.
Agreed. One other one I'd like to talk about on the enablers here is also asset, our underlying CMDB to JSM. And where I like organizations to think about this is not just your traditional CMDB where I'm going to keep all the technical configuration of my infrastructure. Think of it as also an enabler for like service requests. I can use that to drive my software or hardware product catalogs. It's also where I can drive some of my processes. Do things like lookups for approvers, stakeholders, product owners. So there's a wealth of potential opportunities in asset if we leverage that data throughout our other practices as well. Okay. So in terms of our discussion today, we kind of wanted to take kind of 4 key aspects of Jira Service Management and look at how we can take the out of the box to improve today's IT operations or service management and lift our game. And then going above and beyond the out of the box with some minor tweaks to further improve that, again, hopefully give you some ideas of how you can further improve your own implementation. We're going to start in change enablement. We'll spend some time in analytics and look at our many options around there. We're also going to talk about the marketplace because that's a true force multiplier for many of our customers. And then finally wrap it up with our integrations and how we're accelerating some of those possibilities through Forge. Okay, so we're going to start with change enablement, and we specifically kind of wanted to target change enablement. And part of the reason for that is when I talk to customers, quite often I hear, this is our process for change management or change enablement if you're embracing ITIL v4, and it's been this way for years. And we'll ask, so why do you do it this way? Well, it's how we've always done it. I mean, AJ, have you run into a number of organizations that have just been forever locked in certain processes for change enablement?
Yeah, I think it's one of the constants for groups because they want to make sure that they are doing their development in a thoughtful and considerate way so that they're not endangering their production environments and endangering their customer experience. But what's the only thing that's constant in life, right? Is change. And enabling change within your organization means that you need to empower people to make the changes that need to happen in the environments so that your business can constantly improve.
Now, what the rest of the business doesn't always recognize is that IT has to balance all that with the risk. We want to make sure that we're not implementing risky changes and we're not bringing down critical services because we didn't fully think through a change. Unfortunately, the rest of the business just sees that as IT slowing things down and adding friction to all of our processes, particularly in organizations with DevOps. They want to constantly move faster. Let's push it out. Let's push it out. So if we think about, out of the box, how JSM helps accelerate some of this process. One, it's the integration to our CI/CD pipeline. So being able to take code changes, commit that into pre-production or test environments, have it automatically generate a standard change so we've got a nice auditable trail that those changes occurred, but I don't necessarily need to bother anybody with approvals. So let's go ahead and push that out into production, but with the documentation around that change request. Furthermore, once we get into production environments, leveraging our automated risk assessment capabilities to be able to pre-identify, do we have some collisions going on with other changes to that infrastructure? Do we have existing incidents or problems that may impact that particular change request? Let's use those to kind of factor into our change requests. All of those help kind of reduce some of that friction, with our change enablement capabilities. Additionally, where I see a lot of organizations helping accelerate change is opening up change initiation to a larger audience. So traditional platforms, I have to be a full-blown agent in the platform to go log a change request. So it tends to be a back-end process. By pushing up the initiation of change requests into our self-service portal and also leveraging our dynamic forms to be able to capture the right inputs for those change requests, we can kind of democratize who's initiating these change requests, out to product owners that may not traditionally have agent roles within your ITSM platform.
I think it's also worth pointing out that you can really easily use some of the built-in automation tools to automate some of these processes to make it much easier for you to submit those requests without anyone having to submit anything, right?
Exactly. And also being able to do things like we mentioned before, lookups into asset to be able to say, are we including the right stakeholders in this particular change? Do we have the right approvers? Instead of forcing our users to have to remember who's the owner of ERP, who should I be adding as an approver? Instead, we can automatically pull that over from our asset data if we've got it sufficiently populated. But all that is thinking about out of the box. And we want to think about how do we actually take that the next level out. And as part of that, we want to think about how can we leverage analytics to change how we approach change management. So there's kind of 3 areas that we wanted to talk about today for change enablement. One is considering data classification. And what we mean by that is, the data on your systems are not all equal across your environment. You're going to have some systems that have administrative data, maybe some configuration details. You'll have other systems that have customer data or financial data. We want to treat those slightly separately. We also want to take historic success into consideration here. And what drives this is actually me personally, I have an issue with the whole concept of having certain types of changes be standard changes and other types of changes be normal and having to go through the approval process. Part of that stems from my own history. I have had numerous times that I've applied a patch that seemed to be a simple change implementation that still brought down services or caused application degradation. I've had firewall rule changes, whitelisting that seemed innocuous until I started getting a flood of tickets into the system.
And conversely, I've had things that have been flagged as high risk, high potential for damage to systems go through without problems, right? And you only need to know these things historically because that's the real measure of whether something's high risk or not. It's using data and the analytics that we have to make those decisions versus necessarily a human error and kind of conception of what risk is.
Absolutely. So if we kind of blend all that together, how can we leverage some of that historic metrics and the automation capability to kind of give us an alternative path here? So let's take a moment and look at one possibility here. Okay, so in this environment, I'm just going to create a change request, no request type. We're going to do just a upgrade to one of my critical applications, in this case, CRM. One of the first things I want to do is link that to the specific CIs I'm impacting in asset. Then I want to classify that particular change, and I want to be kind of granular with that particular change. Things like, it's a major application update versus minor update. We want to delineate some of our network changes, like routing changes or whitelisting, blacklisting. So once I've documented that change classification, then we'll set our time period that we want to implement this particular change. We'll do this next week. And before I hit submit, you'll notice I haven't flagged whether this is a standard or normal change. All I've done is just document what am I thinking about doing to the environment and specifically pointing to what specific hosts or systems I'm going to be changing as part of this change request. So we'll create the change. Let me open it up. And in the back end, we've got some automation that's now kicked off. And at the moment, we don't know what kind of change this is going to be. Right now, as we can see over in my pin fields, my change type is none, partly because my automation process is running at the moment. Should execute here in a moment. And let me do a quick refresh. And a couple of things have happened. So one, through our automation, we did a quick lookup to say, okay, in the past, for this particular CI, it's a Linux server, it's an OS. How many times have we done a major application upgrade on that particular server? Of those changes, what was our success rate for that type of change? And in this case, the metric we came back with was 93%. Well, why should this go through a normal change and have a whole bunch of approvals, a whole bunch of friction, when it's been very successful in the past? So in this case, we prescriptively assigned this to a standard change request. So we rerouted it to an appropriate method of change that's accelerating our business, but we're not impacting us in terms of risk. Okay? So let's think for a moment how we actually built this out. So this is all through a single automation rule. And we basically, I call it my new risk model. And we basically fire it off anytime a change request is initiated, and we haven't applied this calculation before. We'll then basically use our smart variables. As we can see here, I think I've got one for change success. I've got another for total changes within the system. Here we go. And we do basically a JQL lookup to say, okay, how many times have we had a issue type of change request? It has used that particular CI type, and it did not have a status of abandoned or canceled. We then follow that up with, we flag that as my total changes, and then we do one more lookup that's essentially the same query, except the big difference here is we look for where was the status as completed to further narrow that down. And then once we've got those two metrics in the system for this automation, we then do some math. And now we're calculating our change success. Basically, divide our success, our successful changes by our total changes. We get a ratio here. Now, think of this as just a starting point. I mentioned earlier things like data classification. In this particular model, we actually took it even further to say, okay, let's have a metric associated with it based off whether or not this particular system being impacted is in production versus test or dev. We had another metric that we quantified based off what kind of data do we have on this system? Does it have customer data? If that's the case, let's use a numeric multiplier to basically get us a nice little metric that we can use and set an internal threshold for anything under this needs to be a normal change. Anything over this, we feel comfortable making this a standard change. So it helps us accelerate a large number of changes without that risk side effect. Now, one other aspect I like to point out here is we saw in this example a single CI being attached to that change request. Well, what if we had multiple CIs that we were impacting? What we would do in that exercise is perform the same kinds of calculations, but we would take the floor. What is the bottom number of my change success? And use that as our factor in here. Because if we think about it, if I've had 3 servers and 2 of them come back with 95% success rate, the third one comes back with a 5% success rate, I want that 5% to keep me in the realm of normal change. So our next topic here is improving analytics. And we start with kind of an idea of what are our options, because you're not constrained to just what JSM comes with out of the box. We've got our native reporting, which we'll spend some time in. We also have some third-party BI analytics that AJ is going to spend some discussion time with us on. And then we also have our big brother Atlassian Analytics recently released for our enterprise customers. So if I start with our baked-in standard reporting, it has some advantages. It gets you out of the box very quickly. I can produce reports. I don't have to know code. I don't have to constantly go to a DBA or an admin to build out these reports. So it's great for my everyday, I think of it as my 80% rule of reports. However, there's going to be times that I want to leverage external data or I want to do some more complex calculations. And that's where we get into third-party options as a great option. You've had a lot of great experience with this with customers, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm implementing at customers out in the world, we find that a lot of them already are using certain data analytics tools, and they want to continue to use those tools so they can pull in data to the reports that they already have, or be able to make decisions using a format that they're already familiar with. There's a lot of options out there, Easy BI, Tableau, and Power BI, and you can really pull that data from your Jira environment through built-in connectors that allow you to easily pull that information into the system and then build out the reports in the system that you're already familiar with and incorporate it into the data analytics that you're already doing at your company. As we saw earlier, you have a wealth of data inside of your Jira environment, and to not use that to help inform your decisions is really not going to do yourself any services. Now, I think the really exciting part about the Atlassian analytics that you're about to talk about, Ryan, is that that is a really powerful option too. If you're not using Tableau or Power BI currently, I think you should really listen to what Ryan's about to tell you about what you can do with the Atlassian analytics.
Okay, let's take a look at it. So, as I mentioned before, Atlassian Analytics recently became available for our enterprise customers and really gives us a lot more powerful options in terms of how we want to slice and dice our data in JSM, but also the ability to bring in third-party data to enrich that data, to take scenarios like, hey, I'm curious about how service disruptions have impacted revenue, for example. Well, we really need third-party data to really reference that. Or I want to understand the cost of service delivery. Well, again, third-party data is going to be useful for that, but we really want to be able to take some of our asset data and merge that into it. So, as part of analytics, we get some rich dashboards, and we'll actually spend a little time in how those are built out within the system. Very easy, nice and clean interface. But what it also provides is a data lake. So a big data repository for not only my JSM instances, because with enterprise I could also have multiple instances that are feeding into this, but also my existing data sources out there, like any MS SQL data repository, many cloud data repositories as well.
And some of those tools that we talked about earlier that we're building reports in, you can see that the business intelligence tools have the ability to feed in. So even if you're using an outside data reporting system currently, you can pull that information into your Atlassian analytics.
First and foremost, in analytics, I do gain additional dashboarding capability. And we'll just take a look at one of the examples. I know there's also a session today on analytics as well, so I'm not going to go as deep into that. But a few things I like to point out are, one, the ability to be able to evaluate like this week against last week. How have we improved or digressed? Also the ability to have multiple interesting visual aids like, what are the types of requests we're getting into the system? Also being able to on-demand filter that data by the project or the request type. And then if we think about how we get the data into the system, so it's very easy to bring in all of your JSM data from your existing repositories, but I can also come in and add data sources like from Google, Microsoft Server, as I mentioned, Amazon, and more. And then once we've got that data into the system, our visual query language makes it easier to, like in this case, take multiple issue types, and then maybe adding in a column for, what is our total time spent on those tickets. And then as we can see here, I just added a quick filter for, let's filter out anything where we're not tracking time. And very quickly, we've got our first query into the system. We're already getting data out of it. From there, we also have the ability to group and aggregate any of our columns of data that we're pulling in, perform calculations against any of those attributes as well. And then once I'm happy with the content, I simply save it to my dashboard, and I'm off to the races. So it gives us a lot of powerful options that don't really have a high bar in terms of user knowledge going into it, or the need to bring in admins or DBAs or anything like that. So I really like it for its potential to democratize analytics for IT service management.
Well, I think it's also really important to note that this can be really powerful in making decisions about things like what services are we having problems with consistently, or what services are really successful in their changes or their support or meeting SLAs or some of the other factors. Being able to look at this all in one place can really help you fine-tune what areas of your business are being successful and what areas are having problems in a way that has not been so easy to do in the past.
I like that. And one example I ran into this morning with a conversation with a customer was taking their development projects and being able to merge that with data from their APM tool sets to look at how various implementations, different versions of their applications have resulted in performance degradations and really looking long-term or performance improvements, but being able to quantify those outcomes of our changes within the organization. So our next stop is our marketplace force multipliers. And what I consistently see in IT is a lack of consistency. While we may all be running incident management, service request, problem, the standard ITIL practices, that doesn't mean we're all doing them the same way, or our approach is the same, or the way we want to look at those things being the same. So a huge element in the success of Jira Service Management is our marketplace. And I like to point out just how big that is very quickly. And over 5,000 apps are available today. On average, every week, over 28,000 apps are downloaded and used within Jira Service Management. So this is a large ecosystem that people play into. And I know you and your team spend a lot of time with plugins with customers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a solution partner that's helping people with their implementations of Jira Service Management, Jira Software, and the other Atlassian products, is that we're constantly working with other partners that develop apps. We're ourselves not an app developer, but we work with the solution partners that are developing apps for the marketplace, and we vet out some of the best in practice to create solution packages for customers like yourself. And having a solution partner like CPrime or some of the other great solution partners that are out there will really help you to navigate this very massive marketplace. But some of the tips for yourself while you're looking at it is look at reviews on the app marketplace. Look at the number of them, the quality of them. Look at the documentation before you make decisions. And if you need help making decisions about how to get a certain outcome that you're looking for, reach out to a solution partner like ours or some of the other ones, and we can help you navigate that system. But just some tips for looking through them, because there's a lot of great ones out there that can really help bring your JSM to the next level.
Great points. Okay. So while we're on the subject of marketplace, one key one that we kind of wanted to talk about a bit today is our AWS integration. And this was actually just released in the past week or so. I believe it's still working its way through the marketplace. Now, this actually builds on our previous integration in a number of ways. So one, we take advantage of your AWS service catalog. So it means your AWS team can document specifically what offerings they want to offer to the rest of the organization. Things like S3 buckets or EC2 instances. We hook into that particular service catalog and expose that for our users to be able to spin up any of those resources. And it's as easy as just creating a service request, following any approval processes required around that, and then auto spinning up that resources without the need for any of my agents to have to pick up that particular ticket. One other key enabler with this integration is also pulling over security findings from the AWS Security Hub. So being able to bring in that data, route it to my security team so we can get ahead of any potential security issues early, all from within a single platform. And speaking of which, the last is also service reliability. So being able to pull in performance degradations or potential outages of resources, and again, pull that into Jira to be able to manage as a cohesive incident and track it through its life cycle. So helping us accelerate implementation. Now, to give us a feel for what that's going to look like, our friends over at AWS have prepared a little teaser for this.
Hello. AWS Service Management Connector enables customers to provision, manage, and operate native AWS resources and capabilities in their familiar IT service management tooling such as Atlassian Jira Service Management. Today, we will demonstrate the capabilities of the newly introduced AWS Service Management Connector for Jira Service Management Cloud. In this release, we have introduced 3 integrations. You can provision AWS resource via AWS Service Catalog, sync AWS Security Hub findings as Jira issues, and also view and resolve incidents affecting your AWS hosted applications using AWS Systems Manager Incident Manager. We will now demonstrate how customers can leverage these integrations to provision, govern, and operate your AWS resources directly from Jira Service Management. In this demo, we will see how AWS Service Management Connector is used for provisioning an AWS resource via Jira Service Management using AWS Service Catalog, how AWS Security Hub detects security issues on the provisioned resource to create a security finding and also trigger automation to remediate the security issue. Now let's try to provision an AWS resource from Jira Service Management. In this example, we will provision an Nginx web server or an Amazon EC2 instance. Let's open the Service Catalog product by navigating to the desired Jira project, opening the required form from AWS Service Catalog Order Products page. Quickly fill in all the required fields and select Order. The AWS Service Catalog Provision Product request has been successfully created. Let's open the AWS Service Catalog Details panel. You can now see the provisioning product details. Once the provisioning is successful, you can see all available provisioning outputs and the status will be available. Now let's navigate to the EC2 Management Console to see the deployed Nginx web server, which is an EC2 instance. The EC2 instance has been successfully provisioned. Let's view the details of the provisioned EC2 instance. The EC2 instance is provisioned with a security group that allows access from any source on port 22, which is a security issue. This will generate a finding in Security Hub. Let's take a look. Navigate to the AWS Security Hub console. You can see that a finding has been generated in response to the unallowed restricted port on the security group for the EC2 instance that we just provisioned. The AWS Security Hub is also pre-configured to trigger an automation to remediate such security findings. Let's return to Jira Service Management. A Jira issue is automatically created for the Security Hub finding. By opening the Jira issue, we can now view details about the finding, information about all impacted AWS resources, possible remediation information, and also the finding JSON. Now let's navigate back to the EC2 console and view the instance summary of the provisioned EC2 instance. As you can see that the automation has been successfully executed and the inbound rule on port 22 has been removed. This will also automatically resolve the AWS Security Hub finding. Our first demo showed how to request and provision pre-approved products available to end users using Jira Service Management. It then showed how detective controls from security findings identified and remediated an unauthorized port. Based on this finding, the cloud engineer can go and update the EC2 product template to ensure that the next request is compliant. We will now see how AWS Service Management Connector enables end users to view and resolve operational incidents that impact their AWS infrastructure directly in Jira Service Management using AWS Systems Manager Incident Manager. In this demo, we will see how an operational issue on an EC2 instance, such as a high CPU utilization, creates an AWS incident in Jira Service Management and how AWS Systems Manager Incident Manager can execute automation to remediate these operational issues. Now let's navigate to the AWS Systems Manager Incident Manager console. When the CPU utilization goes over a particular threshold, the CloudWatch alarm has been configured to create an AWS Systems Manager Incident Manager incident. The incident response plan will then try to remediate the issue by automatically executing an automation document. If a corresponding Jira issue has been created, it will be available under related items. Let's navigate to the Jira issue. You can now see all the information related to the AWS incident as well as the timeline events for all changes and automation executions directly within your Jira issue. Once the issue has been resolved and mitigated, you can now resolve the Jira issue, which will subsequently resolve the AWS Systems Manager Incident Manager incident. We have now seen how AWS Service Management Connector can be leveraged for viewing and resolving operational incidents that is impacting your AWS hosted applications using AWS Systems Manager Incident Manager. This concludes the demo of the features of the AWS Service Management Connector for Jira Service Management Cloud.
So, in light of our general theme today of how do we take things to another level, if we consider that out of the box with that connector, what are some possible improvements we can make on that? So my first one, and I'm actually very interested in the response from the audience on this particular question. How many of you have ever had a user come up and go, thanks, I'm finished using that EC2 instance, you can decommission it now? Yeah, 0. You did? Okay, so that's first time out of 10,000? Anyway, so think about it this way. What if we leverage our automation to now, as soon as we've just provisioned that EC2 instance and we've sent the information to log in from the user, we now start a timer that says now in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, we're going to ping you again and say, are you still using that instance? And if you don't respond within 4 days, let's reclaim those resources through automation. Again, the whole point here is I don't want agents to have to deal with this, so we can all do it through a no-touch through our automation platform. Or we could also reach out to your manager and say your manager needs to reauthorize these particular cloud compute resources. But we need some kind of mechanism to do the reverse side. I see a lot of automation out there that spins stuff up, not a whole lot that spins stuff down, and that's where I see a lot of organizations having some need. Additionally, there's also a lot of potential around thinking about configuration as code. Just like we do with the CI/CD pipeline for DevOps projects, what about our infrastructure, especially our cloud resources? How we can automate pushing out configuration provisions as code that's updated in Insight, so I've got an auditable trail. I can see what kind of changes we've made over time, be able to see a snapshot of what that device looked like 6 months ago, and be able to compare that to help me troubleshoot incidents or problems, or to measure improvement of these kinds of changes. So a lot of potential possibility in there to think about. But I also like to ground everybody in the reality of, at least in the conversations I have with customers, while the cloud's out there and we're seeing more and more utilization of it, I still predominantly see hybrid service architectures. The web tier, the application tier, maybe some of the integration fabric is all up in the cloud, but when it comes to my most sensitive data, I want that in-house. I want to be able to control that. So while AWS gives us a lot of potential, we also want to be inclusive of other tool sets that we're going to leverage for our assets that are still retained within the data center. Okay. That all makes sense to you?
I think it's hugely important because there's a lot of stuff that, for security reasons, people just can't put into cloud environments. Highly regulated industries, government data. I know that in the US, ITAR data has a real hard time being put in cloud environments.
That's an excellent point. And so being able to, again, classify our data and identify what systems are cloud candidates very early and push those over would be really useful. So our final subject today is integrations remastered. So thinking about how we can feed data into JSM and possibly push out to third-party data. And what enables that is Atlassian Forge. So as part of our cloud architecture, it's kind of the integration fabric out there that enables our massive marketplace of plugins as well as many integration possibilities. So when we designed it, we really wanted to focus on a couple of key ingredients. One is making sure that the components as well as the core JSM platform were co-located. That solves a lot of potential challenges that we'll discuss later on today. We also wanted to make sure that the experience is as seamless as possible for our users. We want to expand the capability, but not make it feel jarring like you just left a JSM and went into a different product. We also wanted to make it as easy as possible for developers to build on, because frankly, they're not going to go develop against a difficult platform.
It also makes it really easy for you to develop your own application if you need some functionality that's not in there, or to work with a partner to develop a custom application to meet your needs.
Absolutely. And if we think about the old way, the connect model for plugins, that kind of forced us to have the plugin itself be located somewhere else and try to figure out a feed that was secure. Oftentimes, the data that they were generating resided with that plugin. It just kind of made a lot of challenges for us from a performance, security, availability perspective. So now, as we can see on the right-hand side here, with the Atlassian Cloud and Forge, we're able to co-locate our plugins. That serves a number of benefits, least of which is security. Now I know all my data stays in a single known repository where I understand the controls in place to guard that data. Also, from a scalability standpoint, we're able to leverage a lot of the same tool sets that give JSM its scalability for those same components.
But what happens if something goes down?
Well, that's kind of the other benefit of that scalability, because as I have a single node go down, the others are able to pick up the effort. And for my users, it's as transparent as possible. All in all, when we bundle that with our ease of building, we think we've got a much more successful capability here for bringing in new plugins that are going to help our customers, from use cases to visualization of data to federating data into the CMDB from multiple sources. So all in all, for our customers, we're hoping that through that plugin architecture through Forge, you've got a better app experience. You're not limited to just the out of the box. You've got a huge ecosystem of possibilities there. It also means that you are enabled. Don't be afraid. In fact, a lot of these plugins can be built as simply as writing a little bit of JavaScript. So we're not even talking difficult programming languages. That also means that even if you're developing it, it's built on a platform that's trustworthy. We've got strong security controls in place to make sure that your data is safe throughout.
It also makes it a lot easier to really have the ability to not have to do security reviews for a whole bunch of different vendors. One of the major problems people have oftentimes for implementing new add-ons is they have to do a security review for each of the add-ons. Since it's all hosted and done through one system, you can really ease the process for which you have to do security reviews for those add-ons, making it simpler to implement them.
Absolutely. And haven't you run into some challenges in the past with reporting and analytics with the data living on some of the plugins?
Yeah, absolutely. So the plugins being hosted externally to the Atlassian systems made it impossible unless the app vendor made a special API, and that data would need to be pulled specifically. And if they didn't generate an API to pull that data in some specific fashion, you couldn't do any reporting on it. With the Forge applications, it's all in the same place. So if you have Atlassian Analytics in place, you can pull all of that information from your apps directly into your analytics and make decisions based off of that data.
Absolutely. And as part of our ongoing refinement of the Forge platform, we've now included asset as an endpoint within development for it. So that has enabled us to start building out a new breed of integration plugins. One of the first is our Device 42 plugin. So it's enabling customers that have Device 42 to introduce continuous discovery of your environment into your asset CMDB. So providing a rich data source of everything from your data center infrastructure, your storage infrastructure, your cloud resources, all into your asset CMDB. This also provides an opportunity to do dependency mapping. So really understand when I get a change request for a given host or virtual machine or network device, well, what are the implications if this fails? What services am I potentially bringing down? Today, one of the best ways of identifying that is through automated dependency mapping, understanding what application transactions are flowing through that given application or host, and tracing that up to your critical services. Now, that also helps from a incident response perspective. The common example I've run into is a switch goes down. Well, today, okay, we'll wait and see who complains, and I guess that app was impacted. But if I understand what application flows are going through that, or what servers and infrastructure are downstream of that switch, I understand the scope of the impact. And I can reduce my mean time to resolution, at least to understand or triage that particular issue much faster because I have that knowledge within the system.
It also makes it a lot easier to do problem resolution when you're doing investigations to make sure that incidents don't happen again permanently. Understanding those dependency mappings is hugely important to the problem resolution practice in your ITSM implementation, and shouldn't be, ignored as part of your practices, because it makes sure that your software doesn't continually accrue tech debt.
Agreed. And on a related note, I also like it from a change control perspective, because part of the data that we're getting from Device 42 is it's detected changes in that infrastructure. And now I can align those changes with, well, do I see a change request for that CI in that timeline? No. That might be an unauthorized change. That's one of the best ways to be able to identify it.
So we've talked a lot about a lot of different things. So I do want to point out that if this seems like a lot to implement yourself, there's partners out there that can help you with these implementations. I know that there's a whole group of us out there that can help you out with these implementations. We can help out with process changes. We can help out with software implementation for customized Forge applications. We can help out with any of these problems or any of these implementations to take this off your plate. ITSM and JSM doesn't have to be something that you shoulder alone in your changes. Take a partner that's done this and have them help you get to be the best ITSM and JSM implementation that you can possibly have.
Awesome. So with that, we'd like to kind of wrap up our main theme, and we'll open it up to questions. We do hope this has been a great use of everyone's time today, and I hope everybody's gotten at least a couple of nuggets of ideas of things you would like to experiment with JSM today. Questions? I think
we got some microphones on the outside, so I think there's somebody in the center there.
Yes. Unfortunately, with the lighting, you all look like you're in the witness relocation program. So.
Yeah. So if I'm holding up my hands, it's just so I can block out the lights and see people. What was your question?
So you mentioned some Device 42. Do you have any roadmap for that implementation?
If it's not out currently, it's imminent.
Yeah.
What does it mean, imminent?
We don't work for them directly, but it should be soon, if not out now.
The most recent I heard, which was 2 days ago, was that it's being reviewed by the Marketplace administrators for final approval. Okay. We kind of gave them a nudge and said, hey, we're talking about this. Can we get this a little faster? So we're hoping very imminently.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Hi, hello. In regards to the AWS connector, when it creates the CIs in the AWS environment, does it also create CIs in the JSM assets? Is it linked?
Out of the box in the current version, it does not. That said, that's where I would look to automation to, as they initiate their REST calls to spin up those instances, I would just add a step in there to add the CI in asset. That way you can control which object schema you're placing it into and what attributes you care about.
Okay, cool.
I would also think about the reverse. When we decommission an asset in AWS, we'll want to update its lifecycle over an asset as well.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Thanks.
Sorry. Oh, one right there.
Sorry. How much of this is happening in the data center space as opposed to cloud?
So of what we've seen today, of the segments, so the AWS, there is a connector in existence to do the service catalog and spin up resources. I have not seen whether or not it pulls the event data itself. I think that is an addition purely on the cloud version at this time. The analytics, you've got the third-party integration capabilities. The analytics, the Atlassian Analytics Data Lake is a cloud-only option, kind of by its very nature being a big data lake. The change enablement that we saw earlier, I have implemented that on a data center edition. It's a little bit different because we don't have variables in automation in data center. I really wish we would, but anyway, but it is doable as well.
And you can get around all of those things with various add-ons. Like if you wanted to do some of the automation things using smart variables, you could use an add-on like Script Runner, Power Scripts.
Yeah.
There's lots of options for implementing these same kind of concepts in the data center version.
Okay.
It might not just be as out of the box as cloud, which is kind of the nice part about cloud, is it is a very out of the box solution for a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Right there, like fourth row.
Yes, it's more of a generally it's the maturity model. I like that. What I'd like to hear you take on different the massive feature set in Jira Service Management. Which features do you feel are relevant in which point of the maturity levels? Because sometimes I feel that I'm working with customers in the chaos part and trying to tell them about these things are too far-fetched. So having like a map of where are we and which parts of the massive feature sets is relevant for you in the customer journey right now.
Yeah, so that's something that Axelos actually has a great product if you are interested in kind of understanding your maturity level. That is like a ITSM maturity analysis package. There's a lot of partners out there that can run that exercise for an organization, or you yourself can, run it for your organization. The ones that map out directly to the maturity model tend to be in the incident, help desk, change enablement, but knowledge management, some of those areas. And if you want to reach out, I have a slide that maps them out pretty specifically. So feel free to reach out to me or some of the other partners out there in the marketplace. But there's also the potential to configure your JSM environment to use some of the other practices for ITSM. There's 34 different practice areas for ITSM from the ITIL and Axelos concepts. And I think I've built out a presentation for 27 of them, and I'm continuing to do more of them for JSM, how to use it, and I'll be releasing them kind of over the course of next year. So there's a lot of cool stuff for like vendor management and some of the other like portfolio management for your IT portfolio and stuff like that. So I'm using the JSM tools as well as Jira software, as well as Jira work management to manage a lot of those different aspects. And it's a really cool, encompassing tool that can really help you move from the maturity 0 to 4, but a lot of it is process changes as well, and making sure that you're engaging with the business owners inside of your company and making sure that you have the value propositions of where you want to be and why, and then map that out to the changes that you're going to make in your organization to get to that next step. And like we said at the beginning of the presentation, if you bite off too much at one time, it makes it very difficult to implement. Those big bang implementations and changes never go well. So making sure that you understand what your highest priority problems are, putting them into your backlog, and assigning business value, and doing like a kind of whiz GIF on your change management process, which is weighted shortest job first. What is the highest value to the lowest lift effort can really help you determine and tackle which of those items is the most beneficial to tackle first. Does that answer that question? Cool. Yeah, for sure. Feel free to reach out. Any other questions? Sorry, I'm kind of like... Well, it looks like no. So thank you all for coming. Hopefully you got something out of this.
Indeed. Thank you all very much for your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.